Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Collins, Stud Secretary at West Kington Stud, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the second in our Breeding for Excellence series of webinars, brought to you by West Kington Stud and B&W Equine Vets. Tonight's event is aimed at mare owners and breeders, and we'll be looking at the factors you may want to consider when choosing which stallion is right for your mare. And to help you make the right decision, we have a panel of experienced and knowledgeable speakers here tonight to share their expertise with you. So before we get started, I'd like to give you a quick rundown of what to expect from tonight's webinar. We're very privileged to be joined by Jane Marson, founder of the Competition Stallions Guide, now in its 14th year. Jane is also the director of British Breeding, organising top events like the British Breeding Stallion event and the Burley Horse Trials Parade. With a degree in animal reproduction and qualified as an AI technician, she's also the author of Your Mare's First Foal. Coming from a family deeply rooted in horse breeding, she has competed up to 4-star level in eventing. Jane is a proud mother of 2 daughters who are excelling in high-level eventing, and together with her husband Piers, she runs the Heritage Coast Stud in Suffolk. We'll also hear from Chris Shepherd and Anna Mitchell, 2 reproduction specialists from B&W Equine Vets, as well as Harry Thirlby, our own stud manager at West Kington Stud. Following the presentations, there will be a Q&A session where you can ask our panel any questions you might have. Please feel free to use the chat box throughout the session, and we'll address as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A at the end. Finally, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and a link will be made available on our website and on social media after the event. I'm also very happy to email it to anyone who wants it on request. Now, without further ado, sorry, I just lost my screen. Without further ado, let's begin with our first speaker. I'd like to hand over to Jane Marson, who will be explaining how to read and understand a stallion's pedigree. Jane.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate, for that very kind introduction. Good evening to you, everybody who's watching and listening in tonight. If we can go firstly to a slide with Britannia's Bijou on, I think we'll start there because we're going to start with the pedigree and the use of crossbreeding. I hope some of you can see this slide. So this is a slide of a PDF of one of the stallion pages that we put together in the Stallion Guide. And at the bottom in the green section, we identify the pedigree. Now the pedigree, you've got effectively 3 generations there. We couldn't print, unfortunately, 4 because there's just simply not enough room. Ideally, I would always like to see 4 generations back, starting from left to right, the first generation as in sire and dam, that's father and mother, and going back each subsequent generation. Bijou's pedigree is a very interesting one, and is one I wanted to just briefly talk about first, because we wanted to look at crossbreeding and the use of it in the production of sport horses. Unlike pure breeding, such as in the racehorse industry, where all horses are thoroughbreds, crossbreeding is used a lot in the sport horse industry to breed in factors such as temperament, improved feet, heart, generosity of temperament, endurance, quality of movement, improving conformation, a whole range of different things. So if you can look at the bottom of the pedigree, if you can see it well enough, you can see that his pedigree is filled with a lot of different type of crossbreeding. When you see a horse in a pedigree which has 2 small X's after it, that means it's pure thoroughbred. But capital X's would mean 10, as in Roman numerals XX, where small x's mean a denomination of thoroughbred, so that you can easily identify that there's a thoroughbred line in there. Then on the sire line, which is the top line, so effectively the middle in the first generation, which is the father and the mother, so you've got Little Dale Bright Star on the top, and Bella Britannia on the bottom, there's a line. If you draw that line straight through, above is always the sire line and below is always the dam line. And the same for each subsequent generation. So you can see if we look at the sire line on his pedigree, you've got Little Dale Brightstar, which is actually a high-performing 12-2 pony stallion. And he goes back to British riding ponies, which is on both sides of him, and a Welsh Section A. So they were using crossbreeding to a really high level in that they were putting in a native pony and small breeding to put on real toughness into a very high quality competition sport line, where you've got Mr. Big Cat, who is a thoroughbred, which was put onto Headley Britannia, who's one of the few mares to win Burghley and Badminton. And she was then by a horse called Jumbo, who is highly prolific at producing very, very good event horses, mostly, I think, because they're predominantly incredibly trainable and also just love doing the job. So by using the pony, you're putting cleverness, quick thinking, toughness, and sort of just more all-round sort of robustness into the progeny. Now, the progeny has turned out to be exactly what they did endeavour in their breeding. He's a highly talented 14-2 miniature horse, basically, that jumps better than most horses, has got an attitude to die for work, and is also siring already some very exciting progeny. So that was a really top-class example of how crossbreeding has worked very effectively to produce an elite sports pony that can carry on breeding and be used as stud. So if we could go to the slide 1, which was Eccleston. So line breeding is another term you may have heard about in pedigrees, and line breeding has been used for a long time through generations of people breeding horses. And the point of line breeding is to try and double down on heritable factors. And I mean by that, heritable factor could be, for example, jumping high, it could be going fast. In the show jumping and warm blood world, and dressage, in fact, less so in eventing, but more in show jumping dressage, line breeding has been used through the years. And Eccleston, we don't see it so much in early generations, but Eccleston shows it in his second generation. So he's by a horse called Escape Z, and that horse is out of a mare called Promesse. And the dam that Eccleston Z is out of is also out of a dam called Promesse. So it's quite close, as you can see, but the net result is they have been line breeding for the high performance in his ability to jump high, and it seems like they've achieved it. This horse is now in Europe with Harry Smulders, and Harry's tipped it to be one of the top Grand Prix horses he'll ever have. So in effect, they have, in doing this, managed to improve the jump even more on the sire, who is Escape Z, who himself is a highly talented show jumping stallion jumping at Grand Prix currently. So I'm sure the other speakers will be able to tell you about the genetics of when you line breed, but I think eventually, maybe not in this line, but long term, line breeding isn't successful in producing horses that are very fertile. And a good example of fertility in line breeding and the loss of it would be Tutankhamun, where all the ancient Egyptians believed they had to breed with themselves, and the net result is they ended up infertile and unable to breed. But it's further down the line, but that gives you a good example of when you're looking at a pedigree, what you're starting to see between crossbreeding and line breeding. So if we go on to the next slide, please. After Bijou. Getting there. Okay, so this is my final slide of the pedigrees, and this is an event horse stallion who's out and out sort of classically event bred, if you like. So he is by, just get the slide up in here so I can see it a bit clearer myself. So he's by a stallion called Upsilon, who's a very, very well-known stallion and appears in high-ranking sires in the World Breeding Federation sire line. And he's out of a mare that is by a stallion called Heraldic. So Heraldic is a thoroughbred, which you can see identified by the two crosses after his name. But also Heraldic has become incredibly sought after in eventing bloodlines because he's produced so many good horses that have taken to the sport of eventing. This is an interesting pedigree in that it's classic. What I mean by classically eventing bred is you've got a smattering of thoroughbreds and half thoroughbreds on both the dam and the sire line. So that's the top line and the bottom line. I think one of the other things that I would say that's really very important, and that can be seen in examples of horses such as Lordship's Gruffalo, who's obviously won badminton, and also his sister Pencos Crown Jewel, who has also been placed in the top 6 at 5-star level, is that those two progeny are out of the same mother, the same dam line. And I talk here in this slide about the mother line and how very important it is that you can get some dams that just really do produce good horse one after another, and you can put any different stallion on them and they'll still produce a good horse. So the mare line is really very, very important, and to breed from a proven competition mare is the ultimate, really, to do that. And with modern technology, with embryo transfer and such like, we're now seeing the opportunity of these good dams to be used regularly for breeding and producing more top class horses. So we've gone through the breeding for certain traits. Now I wanted to just briefly talk to you about online resources for searching pedigrees. I'm a bit of a pedigree nut, so I'm a member of hundreds of different stud books and resources available, and you can get really into it because it becomes quite fascinating how some sires are very good as sires of mothers of dams. Some sires are very good in their own right, and you can only really find this by looking and doing a lot of research in different pedigrees. So you'll find in your search for the perfect stallion for your mare stud book databases. So most of the sport horse stud books have their own stallion databases, which will give you varying different levels of information about their own breeding, about the scores of their gradings, their scoring of their jumping, their movement, etc. You've got other online resources such as Horse Telex, which is a European-based system, which is very good. It allows you to search for horses, and it allows you to search for both on the dams line and the sire line, but it also has links through to competition results. The only caveat there is the competition results only basically link through to international results mostly, but they will identify them on the pedigree if any of the horses in that pedigree have got competition results and at what level they have them. So they'll identify whether they're jumping at a certain height or eventing at a certain international level. And you've also got Hippomundo as well, which is another European one. Some of these systems offer you a matching facility where you can put in your mare's pedigree and they'll come up with a group of stallions that they seem would be suited to that pedigree. You can decide whether that suits you or not. The only thing I would say to just be a bit cautious, Horse Telex, they have a lot of information that's very, very good quality that is supplied by the stud books, but some of it's also supplied by individual breeders. So you are relying on individuals putting in that correct information. So there can be the odd anomaly that does appear there. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so now this is the proof is in the pudding, really, is progeny data. So one of the big things I like to do is pull a lot of data together for the beginning of the year for the Stallion Guide. And we've just actually finished doing that. And that forces everybody, to bring out the data and look at it carefully. The World Breeding Federation, which you can access on their website, they do a SAR ranking. They also do a stud book ranking, and they also do I can't remember what the other one is. Anyway, the SAR ranking, they do it for the 3 disciplines: dressage, show jumping, eventing. And you can look at total SAR rankings for the end of the year, which is for all of the progeny that have been competing. And you can also drill down in that and look at what horses have related to the points that each of those stallions have got. It's very good, but again, like all data, please look at how it's collated to tell how you value it. So the World Breeding Federation data is exceptionally good, but it's only collated on international results, not anything else. And if you get one horse that is exceedingly successful on the international stage, that can sometimes skew the data as a result, because it's done on points 1. So I would advise, when you look at that, you look at the overall list, and then you can click on the individual stallions and see how many horses are contributing to that data. Then that allows you to really see how many numbers of horses are contributing, or whether they've only got 3 or 4 who are just winning an awful lot. And that could be as a result of their dam lines being particularly good rather than the sire. Sports horse discipline, SAR ranking data. So this comes from British dressage and British show jumping. If we can go to those slides, Kate, that would be great. So I don't know whether you can see much of those. I can't see much, but you might be able to zoom in at home. You can see that they provide data of SARs for show jumping total winnings and total points, for dressage for total points. And then we also put in there the number of progeny contributing, which again gives you the ability to decide whether the data is how you want it, because it's scored highest ranking is the most number of points. Again, they might have only a few horses winning a lot of points, but if you've got a stallion up there with say 25 horses and he's consistently always in the top lot, you know that he's probably passing on a lot of his genetics for performance. If we could just nip back to the previous slide. Thank you. Then finally, we've got the British breeding futurity data. That is only of young stock. So that's all of the actual progeny are evaluated, not the results, but by their assessment. So the futurity relies on evaluators, trained evaluators, looking at young stock. They're from foals to 3 and 4 year olds. When they're looking at the young stock, they're doing linear scoring, which is a basis of scoring of 0 to 10, for example. I'll just give you a quick example of 0 to 10 on the angle of the shoulder. And if you go onto British Breeding and look at any horse and click on the data, the futurity result, you'll see there's a green line, which is where it should be. And then the scoring, they could be either north of that average score or west of it, south of it. So you get each of those young horses at the futurity linear scored, then they're evaluated by vets, and they're evaluated by the vets for prognosis of sort of longevity of soundness, i.e. raw conformation as they are, untrained as they are in front of them, and the likelihood that they should hopefully remain sound for long-term competition. Now, I can say with great pride that Lordship's Gruffalo was one of the early graduates that's been through, and he scored very highly on the vet score. So the fact that he's still competing at 5-star level would give you an indication that the vetting scoring of those young horses is so very, very important. The other point of the vet analysis is also to advise the owners at the time if they need any treatment or remedial footwork or any support with their nutrition. So there you go. You've got 3 resources of data two main resources, which are of the stallions and their progeny results, and that's where the tables, league tables, if you like. And then you've got the British breeding futurity data, which is progeny, but it's the progeny being evaluated. And you can start to look at traits of the different stallions when you start to look at a variety and a number of progeny results. If we could go quickly forward, I'm mindful that I'm needing to wrap up fairly soon. So there's a lot of information, sorry, I'm throwing at you all. But this is a slide that Kate's managed to find some pictures of me riding a horse. This was a homebred stallion, actually, an Anglo-Arab stallion, third generation of our breeding, from originally from dam lines that all won group races when they were thoroughbred group winning mares. So I always urge people to really look at their mares carefully. The mare, to me, is not only is she going to be carrying your foal, but her importance over the foal's genetics, which you'll hear about more from Anna, but also of her ability to nurture that foal for the first 6 months of its life, really can have a major impact on how the progeny goes into its competition world. Be critical of your mare, so know what her weaknesses are, and when you're choosing the right stallion, make sure, no matter whether you like him because you've heard lots about him, make sure that the traits he has are going to complement your mare or make up for maybe a minor weakness. Blood, we haven't talked, I'll talk very quickly. Blood is thoroughbred. When we talk about blood, we're talking about thoroughbred percentage in a pedigree. You may be wanting to put more. There's a feeling now is for 5-star event horses, you need to have a minimum of 62% blood, but there are always those that buck the trend. Heart of the event horse, who knows how we can manage to find that. We just know that some love it and some will be amazing and some just are lovely riding horses and won't get that. But all I can tell you is from the young horses we have here on the stud, you can usually identify those with a heart and a desire from when they're young. They will be leaders in the group. They will be independent. They have free thinkers, and others will be followers, and they tend to make lovely riding horses, but not necessarily the best competition horses. I think that's my last slide. So please do come along to the Stallion event. We just finished putting it all together. It's on Saturday, the 8th of February at Addington. We've got some top class stallions, all graded, licensed and approved stallions, everything from ponies to top class international show jumping stallions, dressage and eventing stallions. So please do come along and see horses in the flesh and have a chance to talk to the owners and people who are specialists in the trade. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk tonight. So I'm now going to hand over, I think, to Chris, is it?
Yes, thank you so much, Jane. We really appreciated that. I think we've all learnt a lot, and that was a fascinating insight into reading a pedigree. So we are actually now going to hand over to Anna Mitchell, our specialist reproduction vet, who's going to talk to us about the genetic considerations when choosing a stallion for your mare. Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a huge topic, and I mean, we've obviously sort of information on all these wonderful stallions are so readily available. Competition Stallions Guide, but we're also might mean that we're just going to delve into some other considerations with a slightly genetic when thinking about choosing a stallion, and these are so we're going to look at conformation, inherited diseases, coat color, size, and temperament. And Kate, a couple of slides to the conformation slide. Good conformation for it can't be sort of overemphasized. So we'll go on conformation, and yeah, the importance of good conformation can't sort of what it can do for performance and ongoing soundness as so the key sort of aspects to evaluate and from a very superficial sort of veterinary point of view, I think Janie or Harry would be much confirmation in depth, but certainly so we're talking about the balance, so the equal the structural correctness, very important for soundness, so proper alignment of bone and the way of going, including tracking and sort of cleanness of movement, muscling, and also represents its breed and sex. So on to the next one, briefly at balance. So there are sort of many guides to the, for example, taking this image of the 45-degree shoulder angle, showing slope compared to the horse below that has a much steeper angle and can lead to stride length. And then if we move on, Kate. Correctness is particularly important for soundness. So you ideally want to have this vertical line through the center of the knee and then all the way down to the foot on that far left side. Variations on that can really predispose horses to issues, particularly sort of it's about sort of rotation and sort of excessive pressure to be on certain parts of the limb, which can lead to problems, and be addressed as or can be aided as a foal with corrective farrier extensions if needed, but that can't be overemphasized, sort of how important it is to age if they do have a tendency to go one way or the other. It can really be helpful. And then moving on to looking at the from the side line going through from the shoulder and through the elbow and foot, and the back of the knees certainly puts more pressure on particularly the tendon. So all things to pay attention to, and then looking from the next slide shows for example, cow hocks or sort of bow-legged, pressure on those small hock joints, and where there's unequal distribution of weight, and that can certainly lead to, is one of the sort of classics. So then moving on to inherited diseases, which there is genetic tests and health screening that can be done for these to identify. Complication being that there are heritability of isn't fully understood. So, but certainly some, including warm blood, understood, and there are stud books make recommendations or requirements. We'll move on to one that's, I think the next page is one that's less well understood. So osteochondrosis, and this is absolutely not there is a genetic component to this disease here, but it's certainly a very multifactorial disease. It's common, so that's why I just brought it in here. Or this is how to not breed a foal that's going to have it's a disease affecting the growing calf, specific predilection sites, and thought to be due to blood flow alterations, structure, and it may be an incidental finding, particularly at sort of yearling radiograph done, or it can be associated with lameness and joint effusions, diagnosed imaging methods, and treatment can be medical or surgical.
Anna,
yeah.
do you want to just turn your video off? Because I just wonder whether your audio might be clearer. You're a little.
Oh, is it not clear?
If you turn your video off, it might help with the audio.
Yeah. Is that any better? So then, if you can hear me, to the next slide, Kate. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So as I say, it really is a multifactorial disease with certain lines being predisposed. It's thought that sort of 50% of the risk may be inherited. These were highest in certain breeds for hock sites of osteochondrosis, which we talk about. I'm just touching on the other factors that can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So other nutrition certainly plays a role. Again, there are many factors within nutrition, including excessively high energy diets, fast growth rates, rather than the body weight, large girths, and certain vitamin and mineral. We'll move on to the next disease. So, which is, we touched on warm blood, which is pretty well publicised within in sort of stallions as to their status, but it's an inherited disease of resulting in these hyperextensible joints and very fragile skin, and unfortunately these. And it's an autosomal recessive disease, so 2 copies of the mutation are required. If there's only 1 copy, so a carrier, that the disease to the offspring, and offspring of 2 carriers have a 25%. And there's very simple DNA test, or simple for us to take, is available, and that can really inform breeding decisions, or carrier animals. Okay. And inherited diseases, that these are well understood how they're inherited. As I say, there are many others that are, but these are well understood. A lot of them actually affecting quarter horses, but certainly it's not solely breed specific. But we won't go into detail of. Let's move on to coat colour, which is a complex heritability involving interaction of multiple genes. Extension gene that controls the black pigment, resulting in 3 base chestnut, bay, or black, and then distribution genes, which results in distribution of the pigment and results in the black mane and tail of bay genes, which then result in the other colours, and white and grey genes. There are certainly many colour calculators that are available online where owners and breeders can look into what's most likely going to be produced from those crosses. It can be done to the parents to then look at the likelihood of colours in the offspring. We then go on to size, which I know, along with sort of the breed standards and size expectations, what that foal's job is going to be ultimately. It's also, about putting a slightly smaller mare to a larger stallion. Luckily for mares, unlike mares, fetal oversize, so where the foal is just too big at birth, is very rare because of the placenta structure of the uterus. Actually limits the size of the foal at birth. And if a stallion, that foal's size at birth will be limited, and the foal will likely grow to be somewhere in between. But certainly that doesn't happen at birth. So large breed stallions were bred to trouble, but also other environmental factors will have a significant effect on. And then lastly, looking at temperament, which is certainly there are likely but it's certainly multifactorial and environmental and training factors. So difficult to pinpoint. That's a very big whistle. That's sort of very, very quick whistle stop tour through some of the, definitely be sort of then gone into in more depth if you're interested in a particular area.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was a very interesting insight into the genetic considerations. Lots of food for thought there. So we're now going to hand over to Chris Shepherd, who is going to talk us through health testing and stallion fertility statistics. Chris.
Thanks, Kate. It's important to understand that all equine venereal diseases can be transmissible in semen. So just because you're going to be using transported semen from the stallion of your choice, it's important that that stallion has been tested to make sure it's disease-free before the semen is sent to you for insemination. I'm going to quickly talk you through the various diseases that stallions should be tested for. But the HBLB produce a code of practice that gives you a lot more information if you want to have that extra information on equine venereal diseases. And it's a really good publication. You can get it online, it's free, and there's lots of information in there relevant to the breeding industry over and above the health tests that stallions have had taken. But then ultimately, it's important that when the semen is sent to you for insemination, it comes with a health certificate which confirms that those and proves that those health tests have been taken. Probably your vet will guide you interpreting that certificate. But it's really important that you establish up front that that certificate is going to be supplied with the semen when it's sent for insemination. So just talking through the disease, the venereal diseases that are relevant here, there's bacterial, so-called bacterial diseases, 3 of them. The one that everybody knows and has heard about is CEM, contagious equine metritis. In fact, touch wood, we're unlikely to isolate that. Does crop up very occasionally. The other 2, Pseudomonas and Klebsiella, are probably isolated more commonly than CEM. But the principle is that the stallion that you've chosen for your mare should have been swabbed at the beginning of the breeding season to make sure that he's not carrying any of these 3 diseases. In fact, he should be swabbed twice, sort of a week apart. Next slide, please. The next disease that's relevant to the breeding industry, because again, it is this equine viral arteritis, EVA virus, is transmissible in semen. So you need to be sure that the stallion you've chosen is EVA free. EVA is basically a respiratory disease, a bit like equine flu. But it's particularly relevant to the breeding industry because it can also cause abortion in pregnant mares. We would hope that all the stallion only needs to do is take a blood test at the beginning of the season, and that can prove that the stallion is not carrying EVA, and therefore it's safe to send semen to your mare. Occasionally, and there's various reasons why they can come up positive on a blood sample. And if they do, then they will have had further testing done. They would have had a semen collection done and a virus isolation test just to make sure they're not actually shedding EVA in their semen. Next slide, please. And then the third disease, which is probably the least, as things stand at the moment, the least likely that is a stallion is going to come up positive for, is equine infectious anemia. Yeah, it's a viral disease that causes high temperature, depression, and anemia, and a bit the same as EVA. The stallion just needs to have had a blood test taken at the beginning of the breeding season to make sure he's negative and not carrying EIA. Next slide, please. So I just want to go on from disease screening just to talk about the options that you're going to be that are available when you're choosing a stallion. And you need to know from the stallion owner or the stud what options are available from the stallion that you want to use. So is the fresh semen available? Is the chilled semen available? Is the frozen semen available? Or is it just one of those or a combination of those? And ideally, you want to be informed, you want to have information on pregnancy rates that stallion has achieved with whichever type of semen is being supplied to you. Now that's not always easy to get. And the obvious thing is to ask the stallion owner what conception rates has your stallion achieved with the type of semen that you're sending me. But as I say, it's not always easy to get that sort of information out of the supplier. To a certain extent, it does come down to word of mouth, and it's quite a small world, and word gets around if a particular stallion or the semen that the stallion's sending out is not getting good conception rates, then word does get around a bit. It's something that we're going to talk about a bit more in our next webinar on the 19th of March. So please put that one in your diary. Next slide, please, Kate. So let me just tell you about fresh semen. If fresh semen is available from the stallion that you've decided you want to use, then that's good, that's great. Fresh semen is probably the easiest to work with and will probably achieve the best conception rates of the three options. Certainly if you've got an older mare or a mare with a poor fertility history, then if you can get fresh semen, then that is advantageous. If when we're talking about fresh semen, it means that it hasn't been chilled. It's kept at room temperature, but you can only keep it at that temperature for a few hours. So the limitations of fresh semen, it either means that if your mare's been sent to a stud where stallions are standing, then obviously that's easy because semen can be collected from the stallions and put almost directly into the mare. But it also allows you to have access to stallions that are within 2 or 3 hours driving distance to the mare. Logistics of inseminating it are easier, and therefore, if you particularly want to have your mare inseminated at home, then that might be possible. as I say, the semen isn't chilled. It is extended but not chilled. We as vets or industry standard would be to inseminate 500 million progressively motile sperm. That's maybe the sort of information that you as an owner don't need to get involved with, but possibly your vet might want to know that and might discuss that with you. Expected conception rates with fresh semen, yeah, about 80%. Next slide, please. So if the stallion you want to use is not available, not possible with fresh semen, but it is available with chilled semen, then that's fine. Chilled semen allows access to stallions well throughout the UK and from Europe if you decide you want to use a European stallion. Semen's extended and chilled down to about 4 degrees C, and at that temperature it can be transported for up to 24 hours. So it's normally ordered the day before the mare is ready to be inseminated and sent overnight. Again, the logistics of inseminating it are not too onerous on behalf of the vet or whoever's doing the insemination. So potentially the mare can be inseminated at home if you particularly want to have your mare inseminated at home. Again, statistic-wise, industry standard would be for the stud, the stallion, to send 1 billion progressively motile sperm, and the motility by the time it's inseminated the next day should be at least 50%. Expected conception rates about 70%, so less than fresh semen. You have to consider possible logistical difficulties with chilled semen if that's what you're using, because yes, it is being sent overnight by, well, if it's coming from Europe, it has to go via plane and courier. If it's coming from the other end of the UK, then it's just coming by courier. And with the best will in the world, couriers sometimes get lost, stuck, delayed. You have to be aware that that sort of complication may arise. Next slide, please. So the third option is obviously frozen semen, and quite a few competition stallions, because they're out competing and jumping and everything, will only be available through frozen semen. And some deceased stallions will have stocks of semen that continue to be available. So just going back to this dose of semen that you should expect to inseminate your mare with, or buy and inseminate your mare with, industry standard is 300 million progressively motile sperm. So less than when we're inseminating fresh or chilled semen. But despite that lower dose, conception rates can be perfectly acceptable. I've put here 60%, but for anybody that listened in on our last webinar, there's quite a few situations where studs and insemination centres are getting just as good conception rates with frozen semen, if not better, than they are getting with chilled semen. But we always give the proviso that if you've got an older mare or a mare with poor fertility history, then ideally you wouldn't be choosing that stallion that is only available through frozen semen. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of info on sex semen. It will be, I'm sure, more available in the future. It's quite well established in the cattle industry, and there's some companies that are working with sex semen and have been for quite a few years and getting perfectly good results with sex semen. Unfortunately, stallion semen is not as robust as bull semen, and when we start trying to sort it through a flow cytometer and then process it and chill it and freeze it, then its viability reduces, and the results in horses inseminating sex semen are getting better, but they're not great. The separation process itself is actually very reliable, but it's a very slow process. So ultimately, the mare is going to be inseminated with quite low sperm numbers. When we said that we were inseminating with fresh semen, we're normally inseminating 500 million sperm. If we're inseminating sex semen, we're probably inseminating 25 to 50 million. So it's a much smaller dose. So again, that's going to impact on pregnancy rates, conception rates. But it is something that I'm sure will become more available. And Cogent, which is a cattle industry company, they are working with some stallion owners, and therefore it is available to a small extent in the UK already, but for sure, look out for it for the future. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. That's a really clear explanation of the different types of semen and an insight into the health tests that are necessary for any stallions coming to stud. Our final presentation of the evening is from Harry Thirlby, the stud manager at West Kington Stud. And Harry is going to talk us through the different types of stud fees and understanding the terms of those. So Harry, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I'm Harry Thirlby, stud manager from West Kington Stud. I will briefly be touching upon stud books and then talking about various stud fee terms and options that you might encounter when looking at stallions for your mare. So we start with stud books. We have the logo of the World Breeding Federation for Sport Horses emblazoned across the screen there, as we'd strongly advise that any sport horse breeders are aiming to register their foals with a WBFSH affiliated stud book. This ensures that the stud books meet certain standards, and it will enable the foals you breed to compete in various young horse championships in the future. So the stud book chosen would depend entirely on the registration of your mare and the chosen stallion, so it would always be helpful to take advice from the stallion owner, or indeed from the stud books, who are all very helpful if you get in touch with them. There are a huge number of affiliated stud books around the globe. The British stud books who are members are the AES, Breeders Elite, the British Hanoverian Horse Society, the Warm Blood Breeders Stud Book, Sport Horse GB, and British Rhinelander. So a stallion should be graded with one of these member stud books. Grading processes will vary quite widely from stud book to stud book, but should at least include verification of the stallion's DNA, a thorough vetting process, assessment of type, conformation, and at least assessment of paces loose and on the lunge in a colt, as well as loose jumping. Older stallions will highly likely need to be assessed under saddle in their chosen disciplines, again, this is all very stud book specific. European stallions will very likely have been performance tested if they are fully graded with one of the main stud books. This will involve them being put through their paces over a number of days, under saddle with test riders, whilst assessed by a panel of experts. And while this, of course, does give a great insight into the abilities of a young stallion, the best proof of performance ability, of course, comes in the competition arena further down the line. As a final note on stud books, I will just add here, this webinar is obviously designed to focus on sport horse breeding. There are a huge number of smaller stud books for our many native and pony breeds, so if you're looking to breed one of these, they will all have their own standards, their own assessment systems, and speaking to those societies directly is the best way to find out about them. So, next slide, please. So we move on to stud fee terms. Terms of stud fees will vary hugely from one stallion to another. And I will say quickly that for some of you I know who are watching, the next few slides might be a little bit basic. But hopefully for those newer to breeding, this will help to explain a few of the different options and how they work. I cannot stress enough that the most important thing when you're picking a stallion and getting to signing a nomination form is to read through the terms, read through the small print, and really understand what you are signing up to avoid any upset further down the line. Frozen semen will sometimes come with its own different terms due to limited supply, so we'll initially look at the ones that would be more common for fresh, chilled, or natural covering. And it's very important to note at this point, stud fees do not normally, although may occasionally, include any collection or postage fees. So every time semen is required for your mare, you will need to pay these on top. So yeah, can we move on to the next slide? Thanks. So that's the one, thank you. So no foal free return would probably be the most commonly seen terms that stallion owners will use. You typically expect this to involve paying in full for the stud fee up front. The mare should then be allowed as many attempts as necessary to the stallion throughout the breeding season until pregnancy is achieved. If the mare fails to conceive during the breeding season, a free return for the following season should be offered so that the owner can continue trying if they wish to. And many agreements will allow switching of the nomination to another mare, as long as there is veterinary proof that the first mare didn't conceive. So this may give a better chance of success, as obviously not every mare is a fantastic candidate for breeding. Next slide. So no foal, no fee seem to be terms that are increasingly common. These can again still be open to interpretation. Ultimately, the purpose, just as it says, is if you don't get a foal, you don't pay a fee. However, in some instances, you would be required to pay in full upfront, but you'll receive the entire stud fee back if your mare hasn't conceived by the end of the season. In other cases, there's no stud fee payable whatsoever until the mare has conceived, so you wouldn't have to pay until the end of the season. And we'll also sometimes see terms which we actually use quite commonly ourselves at West Kington. We would offer a no foal, no fee, less 25%. So the owner would pay the full stud fee at the beginning of the breeding season, try as many times as they liked the stallion. If the mare hasn't conceived by the end, they'll receive a 75% refund, and we retain the 25% for the sort of fairly significant admin efforts of handling paperwork, chasing up, and getting all the results back. So whilst no foal, no fee terms are undoubtedly very kind to the mare owner and very desirable, they do often leave the stallion owner chasing for payments and information at the end of the breeding season. So we really do understand why some stallion owners will choose not to offer these terms, as it can make it quite tricky for them. Next slide, please. So live foal guarantee is another expression that we seem to see used increasingly. It can initially look a little misleading, as sadly, no matter how hard we try, there is no way of guaranteeing a live foal at the end of the process. But as with all terms, different owners choose to interpret these in different ways. So typically, we would see either a free return will be offered to the stallion indefinitely until a live foal is on the ground. That could end up being several seasons, hopefully not. Or alternatively, a full stud fee refund might be offered if a live foal is not reduced. When it comes to defining what a live foal is, I'm afraid, yet again, I do have to use the phrase open to interpretation. Depending on different wording that I have personally seen, it could be a foal that leaves the womb breathing, a foal that stands and nurses, a foal that lives until 24 hours, or a foal that lives until 48 hours. All of this, again, is back to the importance of reading the terms and ensuring you're happy. I haven't personally seen any terms more generous than 48 hours, and truly, once a foal has made it to this point, we sadly all know that horses are horses and anything can happen, so the stallion owner probably has fulfilled their obligations. But as a final note on this subject, I would say you'd always advise maintaining open dialogue with the stud or stallion owner that sells you a nomination. They ultimately have a vested interest in you having a successful experience and your mare producing a foal, and they will want to be as helpful to you as possible in all eventualities. Next slide, please. So then we move on to frozen semen. So as I said earlier, frozen semen can have certain variations in its terms compared to the fresh or chilled ones you'd likely see with the others. You will see agreements where there is a limitless supply and you can keep on trying and have no foal free return. But as frozen semen does have its own production and storage costs, there will always be a finite supply, so it's not so common to see it offered in unlimited quantities, like you might with the fresh or chilled. So typically seen options would be, you might see the semen sold by the dose, so this would be an insemination dose, as Chris has already talked about. Hopefully that's a dose containing at least 300 million progressively motile sperm. You'd usually expect semen sold by the dose to be at a slightly cheaper fee than what you might have paid for a nomination for the stallion fresh or chilled, as you would anticipate that it is giving you one chance and one chance only. If purchasing a single dose, if you didn't achieve a pregnancy, you shouldn't expect to get any sort of replacement or refund. Some agreements, probably most agreements, will stipulate that you can only use that one dose to obtain one pregnancy to avoid people splitting the dose and inseminating more than one mare, but others may not. Another option, historically, we've certainly sold a lot of semen from here in this way. We would sell it as a contract. So in that contract, we would allow the purchaser the use of up to 3 insemination doses to be used one at a time. That would be at an agreed stud fee and with a contract, allowing the purchase of up to 1 pregnancy. We would always prefer to ship out the semen 1 dose at a time, as otherwise you do tend to reach the end of the breeding season and find there's doses dotted here, there, and everywhere all around the country that need gathering back up and returning, and that creates its own issues for us all. You will also see semen from time to time sold without terms, which hopefully should be interpreted exactly as it sounds. You purchase the semen and you do as you wish with it, use it on as many mares as you wish, and register as many foals as you wish. There are undoubtedly people who've benefited hugely from such agreements, may have split doses, achieved multiple pregnancies, and bred many nice foals for a small outlay. There is, on the other hand, potential cons, which need ironing out before going into these agreements, such as, will you receive any covering certificates from the stallion owner, as your foals will be very difficult to register without it. You have no comeback, no refund whatsoever if you don't achieve any pregnancies. And as our vets here can tell us, although pregnancies from very low volume inseminations are perfectly possible with young, reproductively healthy mares and knowledgeable vets, splitting doses will always reduce the number of sperm you're inseminating with and ultimately reduce your conception rates. So hopefully that's given you all sort of a bit of an overview of different stud feed terms and options. I think, again, I'd just reiterate the most important takeaway is to always read the small print. And if you don't understand the terms, it's much safer to talk to the stallion owner and clarify to avoid any upset further down the line. I hope that's been helpful, and I'll hand you back to Kate for the Q&As.
Thank you, Harry. And yes, that was very helpful indeed in sort of demystifying the terms of stud fees, which I'm sure some of us find confusing a lot of the time. So now, as Harry said, it's time to move on to the Q&A session, which is your chance to ask the experts anything you like about choosing a stallion for your mare. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can, but if we don't have time to answer yours, or you think of something later that you wish you'd asked, please do get in touch, send us an email or give us a call, and we will be very happy to answer that for you. There'll also be a transcript of this Q&A session, which will be on our blog, on our website, available for anyone to see, if you want to revisit any of the answers at a later date. So without further ado, I am going to move on to the Q&As, and there are already some here. Oh, someone's telling me Anna's signal's not the best. No, I know it. I'm so sorry about that. I have a question. Do any of our native breeds have a place in sports horse breeding? I wonder whether, Jane, you might like to answer that one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Well, I think the pedigree we looked at right at the beginning with Bijou showed the versatility of putting a native breeding in. On his third generation, there was a Welsh section A. There is a really good move at the moment to use a lot of Connemara's. There's some very exceptional Connemara pony stallions about, and they are proving their own right competitively, and they're also proving to be very good crossbreeding stallions onto maybe rather lighter boned thoroughbred types or warm blood types. Certainly the use of native breeds has been used over a long period of time, and certainly is on the up again for these various individual traits that one might want to be putting in, like sort of endurance, temperaments, general rideability and trainability. So I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah, thank you. I think that helps a lot. Someone else has asked, if the stallion I want to use is only available through frozen semen, can I still have her inseminated at home? So perhaps one of our vets could answer that for me, please.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think it's going to be down to your vet who's going to be doing the insemination. But for me, you'd have to persuade me pretty hard to inseminate a mare at home with frozen semen. The reason being that it is time consuming. We have to examine the mares quite a few times to get the timing of the insemination right. And if you're going to get good conception rates, they've got to be inseminated really close to ovulation, and that necessitates lots of examinations. It is so much easier for us as vets to do these examinations with a mare in stocks, and a mare at home. We're not going to have that option. Whereas if the mare goes to a stud, West Kington or wherever, then stocks are available. We as vets will be doing frozen semen to locations such as West Kington, which are very close to us. So it's easy for us to get there to do all these examinations, and we're probably going to be there doing other similar mares with frozen semen. So yeah, all in all, for me, I would much rather the mare, if the stallion that you want to use is only available through frozen semen, I would much rather you send the mare to a stud to be inseminated there.
And can I just add, I think it does quickly end up being much more cost effective as well. A, because we rarely need to sedate any mare that's in stocks at stud, and B, that we often, because we're there anyway, there aren't the same visit fees that you'd have if we went and visited your home every 6 hours or whatever. Would you? I don't know if you'd agree, Chris.
Yeah, I think we've proven that time and time again. As and when somebody has twisted our arm to do them at home, then it usually works out much more expensive.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers that question. So Anna, with regard to your presentation, I have a question. Re the Stallions' genetic considerations. How can the mare owner obtain this information? Is some of the testing part of the stallion grading process with relevant breed society?
Yeah, absolutely. Some is, so things well understood diseases that are tested for widely, like the warm blood fragile foal syndrome. Absolutely, that information is available with the breed societies. More complicated with things that are where the heritability is more complex, like things like osteochondrosis, but certainly, lots are, and Janie might have more to add to that as well. I think we were discussing it before.
We're seeing, when putting together the guide each year now, many more stallions identifying and doing genetic tests. So we put in, for example, the ability to promote the fact that your horse has been tested for genetic diseases. And I'm not talking venereal diseases, I'm talking about actual genetic diseases, really only about 4 years ago. And there was a few, and there was, like Chris was saying earlier, there were some people who were quite nervous about identifying their horse was tested or even a carrier for fetal foal syndrome. The point of it is, it means that you don't then breed it inadvertently with the mare that's also a carrier. And we now see pretty much all the stallions are actively promoting the tests that they're taking, and many more are doing many more tests as they become more available.
Lovely, thank you very much. So Harry, this is a difficult question, I'm sorry, but somebody is asking what stallions will be standing at West Kington this year.
Yes, we are sort of in the process of finalizing the lineup at the moment, which, yeah, unfortunately is where we tend to be in January. So keep an eye on social media, and hopefully there'll be lots of announcements over the next couple of weeks. Yes, I mean, what we can say with certainty is we've got Jamori, our thoroughbred, and Hernsbrook New Moon here, just been health tested, and they'll be up and running in the next couple of weeks for whenever anybody wants them. And also, certainly, we know we're expecting John Chambers and C, another thoroughbred stallion, sort of early on in the season. But yeah, a couple of other things to iron out dates-wise. So we hope to be confirming them all in the very near future. And yeah, we'll get that out online and on social media. So
perfect, thank you. Another question: do you recommend inseminating on foal heat, or is it better to wait a cycle? Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy to. So really, it depends on the situation. If a mare in the right case selection, the pregnancy rates can be really good with full heat breeding. So if there's a real reason why, be it that it's near the end of the season and we're going to end up with quite a late foal, if that mare is foaling quite late and an owner is keen to have get things going as quickly as possible, if that mare, we have certain criteria that we would follow quite strictly to say, okay, yeah, this is a good candidate. For example, the mare needs to have, we wouldn't want her to have her first ovulation post-foaling before sort of 9 days to sort of 10 days. Also, if the mare has any bacterial growth on the swab, we'd be slightly wary, or if she's having trouble sort of involuting her uterus. So if her uterus is having trouble sort of recovering after and has some fluid and at that sort of stage, at full heat stage, then we'd be wary and advising against it. But certainly if the uterus looks great and we get a nice swab result, and she's not too quickly ovulating after foaling, then it absolutely can be a good option. But in general, I'd say the default is that when there's no rush, and or sometimes it's that the stallion is going to be stopping collecting soon, so that's the rush. It's not actually the mare, but the stallion that she's due to go to. But certainly, if there's no rush from any reason, then the default would be to let her have a full heat ovulation, and potentially swab her at that stage just to see that she's doing well, cleaning up well, and then short cycling her after that ovulation, so giving her prostaglandin, bringing her back into season a bit quicker after that first ovulation.
Thank you for clarifying that, Anna. So I have a maiden 19-year-old mare. Should I use fresh semen, and what's my starting point in the process? She clarifies, I would be using surrogate mares.
Yeah, so happy to. So I think, yeah, definitely sensible to consider fresh semen. The challenge with 19-year-old maidens, even if we're going for embryo transfer, the challenge is that the cervix can become quite fibrotic because it hasn't had to expand and expel a foal before. It can become quite fibrotic, and therefore those mares can struggle. Those sort of later teen maidens can struggle to sort of clean up or expel fluid after the insemination, and fresh semen sort of produces the least reaction, and obviously is often the best quality semen. So I would definitely say yes, sensible to consider fresh semen, and just sensible to go in with eyes sort of wide open when we're starting breeding a maiden 19-year-old. Certainly we have we have plenty of older teen mares that are maidens, because that's the nature of breeding sport horses. They have a career, and then they may not have had a foal, and then they go on to be a broodmare later. So it's certainly something that we're commonly dealing with. But it's also we're also commonly battling the problems of an older maiden cervix. So just worth going in with your eyes wide open, and we take we'd ideally see as she comes into season quite gradually, and take a swab and see whether there is a problem in there, so bacterial endometritis, so infection in there before we even start, because sometimes these older maidens might need some treatment before we embark on the breeding cycle, but certainly definitely it's really rewarding when you then have success from a special older mare.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you. And on the other end of the spectrum, what's the minimum age that I can put my young mare in foal via AI? Chris, maybe, or Anna, or
yeah, a 2-year-old. People do put 2-year-olds in foal. Probably more in Europe than we do in the UK, but like Anna was saying, if it's going to be a competition horse, then a competition mare, then some people like to get foals either end of the competition career. So they have a foal before it starts competing, and then it competes, and then has another foal when it's finished competing. The limitations with 2-year-olds really is obviously size. They have to be well grown. And to a certain extent, temperament as well, in so much that they're going to be going into stocks to be scanned and examined. We don't want to have to sedate them all the time. And some 2-year-olds are going to be quite nervous and won't tolerate those sort of examinations at such a young age. So I would say size yes, you can do it, but size and temperament are the limitations.
Thanks, Chris. So Jane, one for you. How heritable are the desirable traits for sport horse breeding? Movement, speed, and jumping ability. Could you take that one for me, please?
So the first thing I'd say, if we knew really how heritable everything was, then we'd all be able to produce 5-star horses or horses that won the 2000 guineas. Heritability, I mean, I think it's obviously the heritability of a trait is ultimately what we're trying to breed for. We're trying to improve our horses' genetics so that we can improve those traits so they can perform better. Certainly individual traits where you're refining, for example, for show jumping or for dressage, where you're particularly looking for jumping high or being able to move more bigger, then they're easier to identify than when you're breeding event horses, when you're looking for so many different good traits. They've got to jump high, they've got to be able to go fast, they've got to have endurance, they've got to have the temperament, they've got to have the heart, and they've got to move for the dressage. So we're trying to really refine so many different things. I think going back to old-fashioned values to some degree help a lot. If a stallion is what we call stamping his stock, so his progeny looks similar to him, he's probably going to be more heritable, i.e. his traits that you're looking for are probably more likely to be taken on board by the progeny if the progeny are taking on his look. And you'll often get this more with the male foals than you will do with the females, and that's when you start to get traits are genetically sex linked, so they're actually carried on the Y chromosome rather than on the X. So you see that more commonly with the male foals. But I suggest looking at the scoring of foals on yearlings and 2-year-olds of stallions. You can start to probably identify some traits. Maybe through the linear scoring, you might be able to see that some stallions produce horses that are much more uphill. Some produce them that have better angle of shoulder, but you have to look at a lot of the data to be able to really refine that. And that's the purpose of the linear scoring. And actually at the moment, there's a big project that DEFRA are encouraging that scoring from the futurity evaluations is going to be feeding into that. And that will start to produce the likelihood of traits from certain bloodlines. I hope that helps. Tell me if anybody can work it out better than me, because I still read the 2000 grid.
Lovely, thank you. And Harry, maybe what's your advice for trying to obtain chilled semen from Europe?
I think the best advice has to be go through a semen import agent. Trying to do it yourself and understanding the intricacies of the import declarations will be, a very troublesome process. So someone such as Elite Stallions would probably be the biggest one around. There are other people doing it too for some of the other stallions, but I think going through an import agent is definitely the best way to do it, and is being fairly successful despite sort of early concerns about changing rules. So that would be my best piece of advice.
Lovely, thank you. Jane, slightly off topic, is the Stallion event going to be streamed live?
Yes, I say that with sort of slightly based, but we love people to come, because that's why the stallion owners come, is so that people can see their stallions in the flesh and they can meet them, they can talk about their terms, they can see the horse's conformation up close. But of course, for those people that can't get to the stallion event, it is available. It's been streamed live with Clip My Horse, and it will be available for registered members of Clip My Horse ongoing for the rest of the year. But we hope you can come in person.
Perfect, thank you very much. So finally, yeah, well, thank you to all our speakers, to Jane, to Anna, to Chris, and to Harry, for sharing your insights into the process of selecting a stallion. Thank you to everyone who's attended the session tonight. Choosing the perfect stallion for your mare isn't always an easy or straightforward decision, as I think we've seen tonight. But we do hope that this session has provided you with a clearer understanding of some of the more important factors to consider. If you would like to bring your mare to West Kington Stud this season, we will be accepting mares for foaling from the 1st of March or insemination embryo transfer from the 1st of April. You can visit our website. The details are on this slide for more information and prices. But if you have any further queries, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Harry or myself on 01249 782 050 or either of the email addresses below. And we look forward to hearing from you and talking through any queries you might have. So once again, thank you all for joining us for the webinar this evening. From all of us, we wish you a very enjoyable evening, what's left of it, and look forward to hearing from you soon. Goodbye.